What's up, everybody? It's Randy Wolfe. Welcome back to the channel. If you don't know how to calculate cash flow, you're guessing your way through real estate, and that's how people go broke. So in the next few minutes, I will teach you a simple formula that could make or break your next deal. So let's dive in. All right, so what exactly is cash flow? Cash flow is the money you keep each month after all expenses are paid. So oftentimes you hear people talk about how much rent they get, or they make this much per month with their rentals, and a lot of times they're not including the expenses. They're not talking about pure cash flow. So you need to be sure you understand the difference, gross rent versus actual pure cash flow. Think about real estate as almost kind of like being your paycheck. You get the rental income coming in, all the expenses are paid, and you've got what's left over is that positive cash flow. So positive cash flow basically is income after all expenses have been paid. And so if your income after the expenses have been paid is higher, that's positive cash flow. If it's negative, that means you're bleeding money. And if you're a new investor, you definitely don't want to have rentals to where you are negative on cash flow. That can really bleed you dry. So a pretty simple cash flow formula is gross rent minus expenses equals cash flow. So what am I talking about when I say expenses? I'm talking about things like mortgages, taxes, insurance, repairs, vacancies. Your goal is to have a solid monthly cushion after all the bills are paid. So you're going to start out with your gross monthly rent. You're going to add up all the rent from your tenants or your projected market rents. You want to be pretty conservative on this. Don't go too crazy and overestimate. You can use different tools like Rentometer or local comps to try to make sure that you stay realistic in what you can get for rent. Next, you're going to subtract your operating expenses. So as I said before, property taxes, insurance, property management, which is usually 8 to 10% of the rent. You're going to have variables in there like repairs, vacancy, CapEx. The CapEx is basically like really big ticket items like roofs and HVAC systems and that sort of thing. There is a rule of thumb, and I talk about on this channel a lot, rule of thumb. It is not the gospel truth, but usually you can kind of estimate about 50% of your rent is going to go towards your operating expenses for single family homes. That's not always the exact, most accurate thing. It's a rule of thumb, but you can use that, and that can kind of help you to understand when you're kind of running through analyzing deals to determine whether or not you want to really dig deep and do more extensive underwriting. All right, I hope you're still following with me, because now we're about to run the actual numbers so you can walk away knowing exactly how to calculate this like a pro, even on your next lunch break at work. All right, so you want to calculate your monthly mortgage payment. So based on your loan amount, your interest rate, and the term. You use free mortgage calculators online. There are tons of them out there, or lender estimates. And you also don't want to forget to include your PMI if you have to pay PMI, which typically is if you're putting down less than 20%. So a real example calculation is if rent is $1,800 per month and your expenses, and I'm talking taxes, insurance, repairs, etc., is $800 a month, and your mortgage is $700 a month, then your cash flow would equal $1,800 minus $800 plus $700 equals $300. So that would be what you would be earning per month in pure cash flow if you factor all these things in. And of course, the other thing is, you may have some other expenses in there, like I said, with property management, stuff like that. But that $800, we're going to pretend that actually includes those things. Another critical thing is you really want to understand the impact of vacancy. Vacancy is a cash flow killer. Always plan for a few weeks or months of vacancy per year. It's going to happen. Every time I have a turnover, it never fails. We go in, we try to turn it quick, but we still have these situations where sometimes with one or two of our houses, they might stay vacant for a month or two, and that really hurts. So build a reserve fund to avoid stress when a tenant leaves. Usually it's a good idea, and again, there's some different schools of thought on this, but about 5 to 10%, I would lean more towards 10 or even 15 of the rent as a monthly vacancy buffer. So in other words, every single time you get paid rent, you should take out about 10% of that and put it over here in another account if you have to, so that you don't spend it. And that is your vacancy buffer. Now, there are a few ways how you can increase your cash flow. So obviously one that you can think of is increasing your rents. So gradually, as the market rents go up, you can gradually start increasing those rents whenever it's time to renew the rental agreement with the person. You can decrease expenses. Now, this is one that sometimes people don't think about. So how is it that you can decrease your current expenses? Maybe you can put in some energy efficient windows instead of having old windows, or maybe you can refinance and get a lower rate, which right now rates are a lot higher. Maybe when an assessment comes out on the taxes, you can contest the current value of the taxes. So you can also do some things like add value. So how do you do that? Well, you can have pet rent, by allowing pets, or you can have a laundry machine inside of the units if it's like a multifamily. You can have parking fees in like a multifamily type of setting. So there are also a number of ways that you can basically increase that cash flow, which is really what you're wanting to do. You can, again, if you can increase the rent and decrease expenses, that's the fastest way that you can increase cash flow. So what is a good cash flow number? And it's hard to answer that. It really varies by market, but anywhere from 200 to 500 per door is a pretty good number that you should shoot for. And I say that because if you're new, just getting started out, and you're only getting $50 a month in cash flow, you're probably going to get smacked in the mouth, because when an HVAC unit goes out and you have to replace that, and you go, wait a minute, I'm making $50 a month, and that's $600 a year, but now I have to replace this unit. It's going to cost me $6,000. You're like, well, what is going on? So if you have that 200 to 500 a month, it's going to give you that good buffer. So when something inevitably goes wrong, you can use it to use that cash flow to pay for those things. Lower cash flow equals higher risk, unless offset by equity and appreciation. It's definitely understandable as you get more advanced and you're building your portfolio to invest in areas where you're getting lower cash flow or even very little cash flow, and you're getting higher appreciation. But I would definitely, in the beginning particularly, not bank on equity and appreciation. I would make sure that you have some form of cash flow coming in, preferably that 200 to 500 range, to protect you. As you advance and you grow, then it's okay to maybe do some deals where you're really not getting as much cash flow, but you're playing that equity and appreciation game. Always aim for positive cash flow though on day one, not hope. Cash flow is the lifeline of wealth building. It protects you in downturns and it funds future deals. You can focus on long-term sustainability, not just flashy returns. And mastering this one formula really would help you become a better, smarter investor. And as a beginner, you really want to be smart and not put yourself in a bad situation. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out my private community. I've put that link in the description below. And also, if you haven't subscribed, do me a solid, subscribe to my channel. I'm putting out free content every single week, putting out multiple content. I've got several video series. I've got a burst series. I've got another series here on the channel. So be sure to check those out. As always, I appreciate you being here today, and I'll see you on the next one.